Ellen Donnelly, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited.
Before we get going, let's kick it off with who you are, what you do, and why you do it.
Sure. So I'm Ellen. I work in tech as a headhunter slash recruiter and soon to be career coach. So I've been working with early stage businesses on their talent strategy for about 7 years now, basically helping fill the leadership teams at C-level, one level below. And then I've also worked on accelerator programs, building companies from scratch. So my sweet spot is entrepreneurial talent and helping these people find the right jobs or build the right companies for their skill set. Why do I do what I do? I think you can always pick, join the dots looking backwards, right? But the key for me has always been helping people really find themselves in their work and find the right opportunity for them at the right point in their lives. There's a huge kind of misnomer about recruitment being quite selfish, but I think there's a lot of recruiters out there who genuinely care about people and the work that they do, and I'd like to think that I'm one of them. So I personally have struggled with finding the right job and these kind of everyday life concerns, and I want to be able to support people with the knowledge that I have. And yeah, I love working with early stage businesses because no day is the same.
What are the things that people look for when hiring beyond professionalism?
It's a good question. I think there's often, when people want to hire someone to work with them closely, they have in mind this kind of mythical creature who'll be both amazing at their job and fun to go to the pub with and probably agree with everything they already think. So a lot of the time you put someone in front of a team and say, this person has all the requisite skills, they're like, oh, they don't quite, speak the way I thought they would speak, or they haven't quite had the right career trajectory for the person I had in mind. So a lot of the time, as unbiased as people like to think that they are, they often come with this huge amount of baggage as to what a good candidate would look like or what a good fit for the team might be. And so it's an educational exercise enough to say, look, here's the criteria that are important for this role. Here's someone that matches them. If this isn't a fit, could you tell me what I've missed? And often it's, well, yeah, the leadership team aren't getting on well and we really need someone that can pull us together. Okay, so empathy or team building is a really strong attribute to the skill set. Why didn't you list that? And they think, well, it's just inherent, right? But then they meet someone that's the best salesperson in the world but can't build relationships, and then they think, oh, actually, this is the key. So a lot of the times people have unsaid characteristics in their mind, and then it's a case of teasing them out. And also, I like to push the mold when it comes to what the ideal candidate might look like, especially in a world where we have a lack of gender diversity at board level and C-level. A lot of the traits or skill sets that someone might need at exec level often it's harder to find women with these skill sets if you're looking at very senior level, just because they may have taken some time out of the workplace and therefore have not reached that certain stage of their career enough to have done all these things and ticked all these boxes. But then a client will say, oh no, but we need a woman because we haven't got any. And it's like, well, which of these criteria might you be able to flex on? And that's when you often kind of hit some difficulties when they say, oh no, they have to have had all these experiences. So it's a case of compromise, I think, and just educating clients, or if you're internal, educating your leadership team about the reality of what a candidate marketplace looks like.
So what advice would you give founders who are afraid of a mishire and they use that to justify certain biases?
I think that being afraid of a mishire is a totally fair assumption to start off with. As you say, it's a huge amount of cost that goes into a hire, both from a recruitment perspective, the salary, and then if it goes wrong, then you kind of starting that process all over again. So the starting point should always be, what are the 3 top things that we want this person to be good at? And actually, not just what have they done historically, because past performance doesn't necessarily indicate future success. What will they achieve in this role? What does 6 months, 12 months, 18 months in this role, what does good look like? And if you can paint that picture, you'll attract the people that want to build that and repel the wrong ones. So you might attract someone that's never done it before but has that real appetite, and actually repel the person that has done it before because they're like, I'm not going near that type of situation or that type of company size or scale again. And so I think that one of the ways to mitigate that risk is often, as I say, just thinking about what that journey will be like and trying to paint that picture for the candidate, rather than saying, have you done XYZ before? Have you scaled from 50 to 100? Or have you been in X type of SaaS organization, because really that's not the indicator of success. It's willingness to do the job, and it's the enthusiasm a lot of the time. Yes, skills and kind of credentials help, but if they can really take candidates on that journey, I think that's part of the key. The other adage, which everyone knows, is hire slow, fire fast, right? So the longer your process, bearing in mind people have lives and they want to kind of get a decision fairly quickly, but if you can expose them to as many different people in your process as possible, from investors to other leadership members to junior employees, you're giving that candidate as fair a representation of the work that they'll be doing and the people they'll be working with as possible. And it's a two-sided thing. I think that's often the piece of the puzzle that people forget about. It's not just can the candidate sell themselves, it's can the company sell themselves. So I often think, don't hold back in terms of your scars and the things that aren't pretty. Tell the candidate all the things that are potentially going to be an issue in this company. Let them decide if that's a kind of journey they want to go on themselves.
The job description, which is the hook to sometimes get candidates in, is so important in that regard. Sometimes you read a job description and it's like, oh my God, that's me.
That's my job.
And that feels amazing. In Startup Land, however, you can go into a company, this is the job description, you go through a slow hiring process, you've met so many people, you're in love with the company, you can imagine yourself going together for a long while, and then day one arrives and it's actually quite different than the work you thought you're going to be doing.
Yeah.
Does that ever happen?
All the time. I think we live in a world of uncertainties, and as much as people like to know for certain what their job will entail or what day one will be, the reality is that especially in startup land, things shift so quickly. So the priorities during the interview process might have changed by the time you join the company. So I think that's one thing to bear in mind, and just on both sides of the table, be open to the fact that your role priorities might shift. But if, you know, the core skill, the core thing that you bring as a candidate is not used in the role that you've come to begin to work in, then you're in the wrong role. Like, as much as you might want to kind of switch it up and try new things, if you're a senior or experienced person and you know the thing that you're amazing at and you don't get an opportunity to do that at all in this new hire, in this new opportunity, then I would just say, why are you wasting your time? The caveat to that is the junior people who have less understanding of what they might be good at or what they want to do. I think these roles, if they're slightly different, go with it for a while and see if, you know, you surprise yourself. But yeah, I think it happens all the time because job descriptions are written by a recruiter who's not necessarily always been in that role or knows that much day to day, you know, the reality of it. Or let's take a founder who's building an exec level team for the first time, it's their first startup. They don't know how a chief finance officer role works or a chief people officer role. They're kind of going from their best guess of their network. And so my advice to people when they're building job descriptions isn't what do our competitors say or how does it look and sound shiny. It's, again, coming back to the problem that you're trying to solve. What would an amazing result to this problem be? What would good look like? And how can we paint the picture of the sort of person that will actually have the skills to do that? And keep job descriptions short. Like, write the top 3 or 4 things that you want them to do and be able to, you know, bring to the table. And by doing that, you'll also eliminate people who, you'll also, you know, make sure that you don't miss out on great talent who read your job description and think, oh, I've only got 6 out of those 10 criteria, so I won't apply. Yeah. As we all know, there's a certain often gender bias around people that do and don't apply for roles based on what they can and can't do. So that's another one, is just, if you don't know what the role will entail, pick the problem that it's trying to solve and let someone kind of paint their own job description. That's the best advice if it's the first time you're building a role.
I'd say it's great advice because once you know what good or great looks like for a specific role or a project, it incentivizes you, but it also sets you up for the later stages of the process. So if I know this company is trying to scale internationally, and it excites me but also scares me a little bit, I'll arrive to the interview more prepared, I'll do some research, I'll know I'm going to have to kind of get to a point where it doesn't scare me as much, where I have some sort of an idea of how I would do it for these specific people. So that's the effect. Before we go super granular on some of these practices, how many years have you been doing recruitment and talent sourcing?
Coming up to 7.
Yeah. Throughout the 7 years of doing recruitment, how many people did you say you hired?
It'll be in the hundreds. Yeah, I've probably spoken to or interviewed, I realised the other day, over 1,000.
So over 1,000 interviews, that's countless hours.
Mm-hmm.
And
I might be at my 10,000 Malcolm Gladwell hours, but I'm not quite sure. Probably by like year 10 I'll be there.
how quickly into an interview process you know what you're dealing with?
The type of person.
Yeah.
I think it's easy to say you know straight away, but actually that's when your biases are working and they're just telling you that this is someone you've seen before and you know that type of person. I think by 20 minutes you have a pretty good sense of whether this person has the right skills or attitude for the job. People surprise you, but generally, yeah, it takes about 20 minutes, half an hour to really get a full sense of someone.
What are the things that are, common to successful hires, if there are any? Like, how do they come across in those initial conversations? What their approach is, follow-up emails, proactivity, spending time on niceties on the phone. Like, are these necessities or?
Yeah, something I realized fairly early on in my career hiring executives, the more established someone becomes in their career, the more senior, often the nicer they become, at least to recruiters. There's this kind of shift that happens when people know their worth, they know what they're amazing at, they know what they can do well, and they are a bit more relaxed in the process because they know that they will land the right job for them. Often when people are still figuring out what it is they do and they're not really sure of their worth or they haven't really kind of found their success yet, they have a bit of a chip on their shoulder and it really comes across in that interview stage. So I think that the good people are often really open about, their salary. They're much more tolerant to a process that may be taking a bit longer than they would like, or to feedback taking longer than they would like, probably because they've seen it enough times to know how these things work. But generally, if the nicer you can treat people throughout a process, regardless of the outcome, the more likely you are to get a call back. It astounds me the number of people who, after a rejection, don't even reply to say, thanks for letting me know. Rejection is a tenuous topic and there's good and bad ways to reject candidates. I get that. And the absolute worst is ghosting and people just completely going off the radar. But niceties go a really long way. I think people forget that recruiters and even scheduling assistants, admin assistants, they have a huge amount of say in these processes. We had this guy not long ago who came into the interview and there were 3 interviewers in the room. I wasn't in the room, but I got told about his attitude was to pick the person he thought was the most important and focus all of his energy and attention on them for the full hour, thinking they were the decision maker. Turns out they weren't. And even if they were, they probably wouldn't have liked that style and they would have said, look, we don't want someone that completely ignores 60% of the room in this interview. So yeah, all of the things that make you a good, decent human being help you get a job.
I'd agree, and I would also say that if you're a recruiter, you spend 6, 7, 8 hours of your day doing that. It could be a day with 10 to 15, 20 calls. If you could be the candidate that lights up that person's day, you've already won.
Yeah.
Regardless if you get the job or not, you're already in the good books.
Yeah.
And if you can be the one that puts a smile on that person's face and makes their life just a tad bit easier, less of a drag, then you're already in a better place.
I'm smiling because I remember this time when I was at my desk and this guy called me out the blue on my desk phone and Ellen, it's me, Tony. I was like, who are you? You just emailed me. Bear in mind I message hundreds of people often in a day. So I quickly searched my inbox to be like, who's this person? And he was so excited by the email. He was like, you've emailed me about my job. This is my job. And I was like, okay, great. Should we have the interview now? And his energy, he was just, it was another level, right? So it was a completely unforgettable experience. And he wasn't really right for the role. But because of the way he acted in that situation and really kind of showed me how much he cared, I was like, let's get this guy in. And I put him in front of the client. I said, bit of a left field candidate, bit of a curveball. He has a energy of a puppy for this role that you might not have thought you needed this person for, but you have to meet him because I've never met someone so enthusiastic about what you're doing. And I'm not saying you need to kind of fake it and pretend to be like this crazy ball of energy if you're not. But as you say, it's like, how do you make that recruiter feel? How do you be memorable and kind of change it up for the better?
Yeah. What are some of the tips you'd give folks who are looking for work in startups before qualifying the specific companies? Mm-hmm. Why work for a startup? Should you? What type or when in your career should you go work for a startup? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, there's a huge amount of opportunity that exists in startup land. There's, you know, industries being literally turned on their head by tiny companies being built out of basements. So it's no wonder that we see and hear the success stories of startups that go boom to make people want to join them. I think that it's easy to imagine that startup life will be all kind of glitz, glamour and big investment raises and hanging out with your buds, eating pizza and wearing trainers. And I can see the appeal for people that are currently in a bit more of an established, dare I say, boring kind of industry or whatever, or role. I think that startups are amazing at certain inflection points in your career. So either early on, when you've just started out, there's no better training ground to go in, see how things really work on the inside. I say work in inverted commas. Startups are a bit like a playground. Like, don't go in expecting to learn from the best and see the most professional outfit you've ever, dreamed of, because you won't. You'll actually see how most people are winging it and they're making it up as they go along. But join a startup that's growing, that has decent leadership and decent mentor type opportunities, as in people that will mentor you, you'll fly. Like, there's some people I've worked with who joined, let's say, Deliveroo at kind of 30-40 people and stayed till they were 400-500 in London, and the things they were doing at like 24-25 are just uncomparable elsewhere, but they hit gold, right? They were in the minority. The reality is that a lot of startups don't scale, or they run out of funding, and so there's a sort of darker side. So I guess my advice is to join a startup with your eyes wide open about the risk that it can bring, and I mean financial risk, because a lot of companies do run out of money and then you're on the job market again looking for a job, and that's part and parcel of the experience, and the winners exceed the risk that entails. So yeah, do it when you're figuring out who you are, what you're about, because you'll get to wear lots of hats. Do it if you've been completely micromanaged for a long time, because you'll really relish the opportunity to spread your wings and just give it a go and figure it out as you go along, make mistakes and not get kind of punished for it. I wouldn't do it if you've figured out what you're amazing at and money's important for you, and so is stability and being at, let's say you're saving for a wedding, or let's say, you're about to have your first child. Not that those life stages are the only life stages that this occurs, it's just so happens. I would, at that point in your life, be like, how can I join a company that really lets me own my value and build and establish myself as a professional in this field? Because the reality is that a lot of startups call it marketing or call it product or call it whatever, and you end up doing a watered down version of it because they haven't got the budget to do it properly, or you end up doing 5 different jobs and you get frustrated, or you do the menial work because that's all that they can give you and you don't actually build on your skill set, or you don't get the salary you deserve. So I'm not saying it's bad necessarily, but it's just, for some people it doesn't make sense to join at that stage when they could be getting 3 times more for their worth in a good proper company, learning from professionals in their field. So I think I'm probably a good example of that. Recently, when I changed from working in a more of an agency environment to going in-house for a startup, I really wanted to get amazing at talent, not just good. I wanted to really hone my craft and be taught by kind of industry leaders around interview techniques and work with incredible candidates and so on. And I joined a startup, and actually I knew the most in the room about that thing. And then I wasn't actually really able to do much of it because budget restrictions and so on. And I was just bought a house, so money was a bit of a financial kind of concern for me as well. So I think that was a kind of perfect storm there. But yeah, generally join a startup if you have a bit more risk tolerance and you're still figuring out what it is that you do, or build one as well at that stage.
So there are stages of your professional life where you're a little bit more exposed to risk, things are more costly. And there are periods where you can benefit from a non-linear career trajectory. So I get that, and I think that's great advice. Looking back at your own experience, having known everything you've known about startups, about hiring, some missteps are unavoidable. Mm-hmm. We all go through them. Yeah. So before talking about the silver linings of a misstep, let's talk about a few of the ways to qualify a startup to work for. Mm-hmm. I'm on the market now. I'm looking for a product role, let's say. Yeah. And there are all these startups that are hiring for similar roles. What should I be looking at in order to choose the right one for me?
Yeah. I think caring about the problem that they're trying to solve is a pretty big one. You're going to be working longer hours for less pay. So you need to be waking up every morning and really giving a shit about what that company are doing in the world. Not just how it looks on your CV, not just, the sound of working for this kind of company, genuinely being like, if this company or this product didn't exist, the world would be worse for it. So I think that's a big one. And there are a lot of startups that have been created because people have money going and they want to just build something for the sake of it, and they haven't thought deeply about the problem that they're solving. And actually, I don't even necessarily think they are adding value to the world. Sometimes it's distracting from the real value of something else that they're trying to disrupt. So number one, care about the problem. And there's literally a startup flavor for everything out there for whatever your tastes. Whatever you're interested in, you'll probably find a startup doing something along that realm. Number two is, how have they thought about the role? Have they thought about the role? Because a lot of the time they haven't. They've just sort of thought, well, we should have someone doing something like this because that's how a normal org chart looks, right? And then they look for someone that vaguely fits that mold. And sure enough, expectations aren't aligned because no one really knows what good looks like. So ask them a lot of difficult questions about, why does this role exist? What will this role achieve? Why would someone like me be good for the role? And if they can't give you a good answer to those questions, I would walk away. The third piece would be the team. So the leadership team, what makes them uniquely solved to solve this problem? Uniquely placed to solve this problem. And I don't necessarily mean they need a track record of 10, 15 years doing it before. They need to deeply care about it. So there's this flexible working company I'm looking at the moment, who the founder has had to do flexible working her whole life because of an illness. So although she's not built a company before, that there's going to be a huge amount of blood and sweat and tears that have gone into building that product. Yeah. So look for something like that makes the leadership uniquely placed. And then ask, who will your sponsors be? Who will your mentors be in that role? Are they people you want to learn from and work with? If you can't see anybody in your day-to-day kind of team that you necessarily want to be like, who you'd look up to or learn from, again, I think walk away. You never want to be the smartest person in the room.
Would you recommend getting in touch with people who have worked for that company, or will that taint your perception of it?
I think it's not a bad idea, but look at the data set, right? So if you go on LinkedIn and you find someone that was there for 3 months and left, if you're going to speak to them, speak to people that have been there for longer or are still there as well. So everybody has their unique experience. Some of the ways to get a good understanding are Glassdoor. So you can go on Glassdoor and search the company and read reviews. Remember, people generally leave reviews when they've had a negative experience or they've been coerced into writing a positive one. So take it again with a pinch of salt. Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you can find somebody who's worked in a similar role to the one that you'll be joining. You could say, hey, I've noticed that you used to work at this company I'm thinking of joining. Can we have a quick chat? Most people will be open to that. But again, just think about the lens through which you're getting this advice or this experience from.
You can do all of those things right. You can do your due diligence on the team and figure out they're uniquely positioned to solve that specific problem. And you realize that specific problem is one I'm passionate about. And the product should be, and the role itself is a role that, there's viability to the role. It looks like they actually need that person.
Yeah.
And you can still get it very wrong. Did it ever happen to you?
It's definitely happened to me getting it wrong. The recent example as head of talent in a company that, I ended up leaving within 3 months, which for me felt like professional suicide, right? I'm a recruiter. I look at CVs all day and I think, well, that person didn't stay at this company long. So for me, that was a painful decision to leave, but I didn't do my due diligence. So that was a kind of lesson learned the hard way in terms of I wouldn't have advised anybody in my shoes to have taken the job. But sometimes in the throes of kind of an offer and being excited and wanting a change, you take something against your best judgment. I think that everything you've just described is probably as good a homework as you can do. The biggest thing, which is completely unrational, is listening to your gut. But we are fortunate enough to live in a time when people do move around frequently and there are loads of other options if it doesn't work out. So do your due diligence, ask the hard questions, listen to your gut, and if it doesn't work out, it's not the end of the world.
Did you ever experience a misstep in your professional career?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in October, I started working for a company that I essentially took the role against my best judgment, to be honest with you. I even have a recording on my phone of reasons that it's probably not the right role for me, and I just decided to ignore them and take the job when it came down to the offer, because I wanted a new job, and it was a leadership role, and it was, you know, near to home, and it was all these things that I could kind of rationalize. But the judgment piece actually was against my gut feel. So my intuition was telling me something wasn't quite right. And had I really honed in on that and been true to myself, I probably would have avoided quite a costly mistake. So I didn't also do my due diligence, right? So did I speak to the team? No. Did I meet the team properly? No. Did I ask the hard questions? No. So I wouldn't have advised me in my shoes to take that role. People make mistakes, and I think that a lot of the time we beat ourselves up for those mistakes, and we think, well, I should have known better, and this makes no sense now looking back. But how much more colourful and rounded a human being are we for our mistakes and for the things that have gone wrong? Because you're much closer to the right version of what you're supposed to be doing through going through those hard times. So yeah, absolutely. I think for the first time in my life, I feel much more equipped to be a better recruiter or a career coach, because I've genuinely felt the pain of a role that went wrong. Like, every day feeling anxious going to work, and feeling kind of the lack of sleep as a result of feeling like I was in the wrong place. You know, put a real strain on my relationships as well, because I was just such a bad version of myself. Eventually I thought, it doesn't matter that I've only been here 2 months. Like, this isn't worth the pain that I'm going through. It's not, the reward isn't worth this potential long period of downtime. So yeah, I'm familiar with the need to move on.
You said it's like a misstep like that is costly. I'd like to know more about costly how, but also it's funny because we have all these mental algorithms of qualifying startups and choosing the next play, and then we also have to add another dimension, which is our gut feeling.
Yeah.
The thing we can't explain, the thing that is more abstract, but it tells us more about ourselves and that opportunity than anything else. And that's one thing. But then you go into a role, you realize pretty early on, I'm guessing, that actually it's not what I should be doing. And there's another strong gut feeling that says, you know, eject, like get the fuck out of here. But there's a societal narrative of like, oh my God, if I'm leaving the job now, it's only 3 months. What will the recruiters say? Oh my God, I'm a recruiter. I should have known better.
Yeah.
How do you eliminate those voices that kind of go against our gut?
I think it's about whose voices are they? What is the voice that's speaking loudest? And if it is a societal kind of, in inverted commas, they, what will they say? And then you're kind of looking around the room at, who are these people? Because the people I love and who know me, they don't care whether I leave. My conscience doesn't care whether I leave. It's just this kind of feeling that we should be doing something. Our CV should look a certain way. We should have hit a certain milestone by a certain age. And actually, the only person that has to live with themselves day to day in that decision is you. And if you're suffering, then it doesn't matter what they think or how it looks on paper, because the reality is that you need to be comfortable with who you are and authentic in your decisions. So I think if you can strip away the shoulds and just listen to yourself, that's the biggest thing. I try to fight the feeling that I should leave my job because of all these reasons, right? I'm a recruiter, I've looked at loads of CVs that look hoppy, and I dislike that. And then actually, when it's you don't care. I was at a birthday meal and I had a breakdown in the toilet. I was so like distraught about how my career was going, and it was in that moment that I thought, I'm quitting work tomorrow. It shouldn't have to get to that point, but the reality is that we often want to put on a front where we think everything's fine and it will get better, but some things just aren't meant to be. And I think the sooner we can kind of release what isn't meant for us, the faster we'll find the things that are.
I wholeheartedly agree, and I would say that there is also some virtue in false resilience, you know, powering through. I'll make it work. And it just puts us in this position where we just can't turn back. You know, I've found myself overstaying my welcome in jobs because of that, because I was so determined to flip it around that I didn't realize that I'm already too far gone. I can't save this. I can't change those people. This product is not going anywhere. And I don't know, probably ego.
Yeah.
Keeps us kind of stuck.
It's asking yourself, what am I working towards? Like, is there an end goal that's worth this pain? So, for example, you might be in a company that's about to exit. if you're struggling because the workload's high and your stress is high, but you think the exit's imminent, it's probably worth persevering for a bit longer just to have that kind of experience and know what that feels like and go through the story, and also hopefully gain some money at the end of the tunnel. But if you have no real sense of where the company's going and you don't really want your career to go in that trajectory anyway, or you don't necessarily believe in the people that you're working for or want to work with them through that next stage, then you just have to ask yourself, is it worth it? And I think that resilience is a buzzword in today's kind of society amongst things like adaptability and emotional intelligence, and resilience is key. But as you say, what's false resilience? Who are you kind of trying to prove something to? And are you going to end up as a better person for going through that, or worse? And often it's worse because you're more jaded and you're more bitter or burnt out. And mental health in the workplace is a really real kind of fragile topic. And if you've noticed yourself having dark, difficult thoughts every day, you're not sleeping, you're not eating properly, you're not exercising, that mental struggle isn't worth the pain, in my opinion.
I want to go and I want to talk about negotiating just a little bit, because we're talking about hire slow and fire fast, and one of the things that sometimes slow hiring processes are negotiations.
Mm-hmm.
And as a recruiter, you've probably seen it a million times. The right candidate for the right company, and they can't seem to make it work. Does that happen?
It happens, and then when it happens to the extent that it's not working, you have to question if the incentives are aligned. So typically, if you're joining an early stage company to solve a problem that you care about in a role that you care about, you will be open to the salary that is set out from the start. And if you've got all the way through a process and you've been clear with your intentions for what you want at the end of it, in terms of salary, and it doesn't work, someone along the way has been lying. Because if you're working with a good recruiter or you're working with a transparent hiring manager, you shouldn't get to the end of the process and it not be a fit, because that should be number one. Like, as much as we want to say we go to work for the contacts and the experiences, we go to work to make money as well. So be very open up front at the start about what it is that you want in terms of your salary or what you're currently earning. Typically when it goes wrong is when hiring managers completely curveball the candidate and lowball them with a really bad offer, because they think, well, if they wanted to work for us enough, then they would take a salary cut and they would take equity and not this salary. And I think, again, that comes down to mismanaged expectations. Find out what's important to the candidate at this stage of their life. How willing are they? How open are they to take a cut? If they're not, don't waste their time with a stupid offer, because you just completely undermine your credibility. And again, with a candidate, if you've got this expectation in the back of your mind that you're going to get a 30% pay increase from your current role, but you only decide to say that at the last minute and get frustrated when they won't give it to you, you only have yourself to blame, because you've not kind of aligned yourself with their hiring process and the role. I think a lot of people expect that once they're the desired candidate, they can kind of play it to their own means and get whatever they want out of the process. But
leverage.
Remember, you're starting a relationship with these people. It's not a transaction like a casino, right? You're actually building trust and you're showing someone who you are. So don't throw too many curveballs around money. I think that the more transparent in the early stages, the better.
So 2 learnings I'm taking from here is, when negotiating, it's not just about the outcome, it's also about the process.
Mm-hmm.
So you could get the outcome you want, but come across as an unpleasant, someone who's not nice to work with, starting off with everyone is, having their guards up and not trusting and feeling a little bitter.
Yeah.
So that's one. And I think there's also a problem that's unique for startup world, and that's founders who are so in love with their product or their mission that they sometimes overvalue what it would mean to work for their company.
Yeah.
Now, they have to be fully convinced that this company is going to change the world and become a unicorn. Fair enough. But if it's, pre-seed or seed money only, and you're trying to sell that vision to candidates, these people are taking a huge risk by coupling with you and coming to work for you.
Yeah.
They're risking their reputation, because who knows what culture this company is going to grow into. They're risking their time and resources. Who knows, maybe in 3 or 6 months, they'll leave you worse off than they were before they started the role. So what advice would you give founders to mitigate their love and passion for the product when it comes to negotiating with new hires?
And if I could wear a t-shirt into these kind of situations, it would say, no one cares about your company as much as you do. Like, as sad as it is, they don't. So I think that's the kind of base level starting point. A founder needs to recognize that they might wake up and go to bed thinking about their company and live, breathe and die their company. And that's great, because a lot of these things don't come to fruition if that isn't the case. You need someone that's committed to that cause. But there is no way that someone who's not worked for your company yet can care that deeply about your company. To them, it's just a concept. It's just a bakery, it's something in the display window that they like the sound of and they might want to try, but until they've kind of experienced it, they don't know. So I think founders need to strip away their ego in these conversations and think, okay, my hope is that this person in front of me will care about this company as much as I do one day, because we'll work together and they'll see what we're trying to do and they'll put their own investment and time and energy into it and get to that point. But I think it's very arrogant when a founder just assumes from the get-go that someone was deeply, committed to this company. So the best thing they can do in that instance is try and understand what's the motivation of a candidate. What are they hoping to get out of this next stage of their career? Is it to learn? Is it to build their skill set in a specific area? Is it to be part of a rocket ship of growth? Is it to lead a team? Really get granular in their expectations and their hopes and dreams, and build experience for them that they have to say at the end of the day, wow, I wouldn't have had that if it wasn't for that founder believing in me and giving me these opportunities. Reid Hoffman, the LinkedIn founder's got a very famous expression, which is help someone build the perfect role for their next job. Like, how do you help set someone up for their future role? If you can give them all of those experiences, then you'll get the most out of them in the time that you have them for. So yeah, don't expect someone to pour 24 hours a day, 7 days a week into the company until they've understood what it entails to begin with, and then also figure out what's in it for them.
There's another Reid Hoffman a term that's called tour of duty.
Yeah.
So like you described, the unwritten contract. Why are you here? Fine, we've agreed on the salary, we've agreed on equity, we've agreed on days off, but why are you really here? And I think it would be super valuable to highlight what are the other incentives companies can offer employees beyond their salary.
What makes for a good company culture? If people could distill that into a magic potion and sell it, you'd make millions, because that's the key, is that there's no science behind it. It's a bit of an art, and it ultimately comes down to, do people feel trusted? Do they feel that they can come to work, be themselves, do a good job, leave early if their child gets sick and not be kind of punished for it, and learn and grow? And it's super simple, but it's really hard to get right. And I think that these things are really hard to put on paper, because the reality is that, as we've been saying, it's an unknown. You don't know until you work somewhere whether you're gonna thrive in that environment. But the more proof points you can get during an interview for someone, the better. So one of the really great tactics the bakery used to deploy when I worked there, I was doing a lot of hiring.
The bakery, you don't make croissants, right? What did the bakery do?
So the bakery is a global accelerator. So we helped startups to get corporate clients, building their teams, refining their pitch deck, understanding what problem they were solving. So working with hundreds of different companies across the world who were pre-seed generally.
Got it. So back to the advice.
One of the recruitment tactics that I think worked really well was, when we liked a candidate, we were quite close to making an offer, we'd give them a long period of time in a room with a couple of employees who actually weren't prepared. So it wasn't like we'd brief someone and say, right, you need to sell to this candidate because they're coming in. It would be, they're at their desk working, and they say, do you have 5 minutes, 10 minutes to talk to a prospective employee about your role and about why you like it here? And just leave them to it, leave them in a room, because there was so much trust that what they would say would be good, because people genuinely enjoyed working there at this point in time. And candidates used to say, wow, the energy here is so great, like we can really tell that people enjoy working here, because it was genuine. If you try to do that in an environment where people don't genuinely enjoy working there, you can feel that falseness from the get-go. So as I say, it's difficult to fake, but culture for me comes down to, how do you make people feel about working there? How do they feel about working there? Because you can give them all the free goodies and the free food and the highest salary in the world, but if they come in feeling like they have to pretend they're someone that they're not, that their views aren't heard, that their work isn't aligned to their values, then there's like, you're wasting your time.
How soon do you think people realize they've made a wrong step, and how do you recommend they bow out if they have made a wrong step?
I mean, generally with these things sooner, because you're less embedded in an organization. If a recruiter got you into the role, they often have a rebate period where they can get their money back from the recruitment fee if there was a wrong hire. So if you're the person who knows you've joined the wrong company or the wrong role, A, save yourself the pain, and B, the company. But before you jump to that conclusion, I think it's worth being completely open in your communication with your hiring manager, the CEO, depending on who you work with, explaining, right, this isn't the role that I thought I'd signed up for. The work is different to what I thought. The company's doing something different. Am I crazy, or is this true? And what's their read on it? Because you might learn something through being open that you wouldn't have otherwise if you just keep to yourself and run away, because there might be something going on behind the scenes that is short term. There might be that they also see that the role is wrong for you and they're feeling guilty, and actually there's this other opening in this other department that you weren't aware of because you hadn't spoken about it. I think it's very similar to like romantic relationships and being open, direct and honest in your communication. If you've got a problem, you keep it to yourself and you bitch and moan about it to your friends and family, that problem isn't going to solve itself. It's only going to manifest more and more. But if you say like, hey, I'm noticing this thing, how do you feel? You might open up this whole kind of other thing that's available to you in this relationship or in this job, or it might really kind of close that down in mutual terms and go, yeah, it's not working, like, let's part terms on good. Let's part terms.
I think once you get to that point, if someone unfortunately gets to that point, no one's winning at that point. When you realize you're not doing the job you wanted to do, you're not doing the work you wanted to do, then there's no one winning. The company's suffering, you're suffering, like you're at an impasse. You have to go back. So I think minimizing the damage that it does to yourself, to your well-being, and also minimize the damage that it does to the company would be the respectful way to go about it.
And if you can position it as you're not just in it for yourself, in your own gain, you're actually trying to educate this company about how they can learn from the mistake that they've made so they don't keep repeating it. So it comes back to what I was saying, the more honest and open you can be, the better for both parties. I think there is a huge risk that people worry about, which is if I'm honest about not liking it, I'm going to get fired. All I'll say to that is it can happen, but if you get fired for telling someone that you don't like your job, you're better off not being there in the first place. Obviously, people are in difficult financial situations and can't afford to not have a job, so it's a tenuous one, but ultimately the more open you feel that you can be, the better.
What did you have to give up on in your personal life in order to be where you are professionally?
I guess I feel that I've come a certain point in my career that I'm happy with, but I always feel like there's more I could have done, or that could be further along, or I could have achieved more. So it's quite difficult to imagine that I've made loads of sacrifices to be here. When I think of all the sacrifices maybe had I made, I would be somewhere else, let's say. But generally I feel that the reason that I have been successful, that I've built a good network, that I've got to a certain salary level, or that I've opened up opportunities for speaking or writing or communities that I'm part of, is because I put myself out there, and I don't think of time spent at weekends or evenings or today or whatever as a loss of my personal space. I don't worry too much about Ellen's personal life versus Ellen's work life and how the two conflict. I try and build those two as closely kind of linked together as possible so that I don't ever resent the time I spend working. There's a balance to get right, isn't there? Obviously you don't want to be working all the time, checking emails at 2 a.m. and going, it's fine, it's personal. But the sacrifice I think I've made are around some of the more relaxing social elements of my life. Like I don't, for example, go out day drinking on a Saturday and a Sunday, because I would not be productive on a Monday, but often I'm also doing things on those days that are kind of work related. Like I build a lot of friendships with people who on paper might not seem like, they might be people that I actually met through work and I build friendships with, and then I continue to be in their lives, but it's not because I'm trying to get personal gain, I just enjoy doing it. Yeah. And so I have to put myself out there in order to get opportunities. I often help people when it's not completely convenient to me, and I always know that these things come back around. So yeah, I think the more you put into something, as in anything in life, the more you get back. So I don't think of anything that I've done that was work related and difficult as a sacrifice.
There's something to be said about the long play, about building relationships, fostering relationships, and I think that's huge. And that's a good advice. That counters the ever-growing pace of things today. There is the work you need to do. Going back to the job description, there is what needs to get done, what's the standard it needs to get done, and what will I be fired for not doing. Fine, do that. Try and do that within your 9 to 5 or 9 to 6, and if it takes a little longer, do that as well. But then there is the work that's outside of work, and that's building the relationship. That's having the 30-minute phone call with the colleague that had a rough day.
Yeah.
So yes, it is work, but it also means about being, professionally available to another human in a friendly, in a more humane, empathic capacity. It means being helpful to people around you. We haven't met for a long time, and yet every time I needed advice, you picked up the phone and you made time for it. And I owe you and other folks in my life who have who made a similar kind of gestures so much, because there's so much uncertainty, there's so much that can go wrong. So many people are doing what they're doing for the first time.
Yeah.
Employees, founders, ourselves, and that extra bit of humanity, of accessibility makes it so much easier to go through some of those turbulent times.
Yeah, I mean, it's not about, the career isn't about the individual, it's about the community. And they say it takes a village to raise a child, but I think, it takes a community to have a good career, because look at any successful person in the world, they've got mentors, they've got a good partner, they've got a good leader with them, or whatever it is. It takes people around you to believe in you and support you. And I haven't got where I've got because I just sit at home thinking and working hard. I get places because I ask for help. I've always been like the sort of person that will go, who has done what I want to do before? How can I get them to share that wisdom with me and that advice? And so because I've been so grateful to have people, around me throughout my career, I want to give back as much as possible. I think it's not like I've reached some kind of heights of my career anyway that I have loads of people asking me for advice necessarily, but when it does happen, I want to help. And also when in recruitment world, people come to you asking, have you got any jobs? 9 times out of 10, the jobs that you're working on won't be a fit for them, right? So there's a lot of disappointing people in recruitment. But if you can take the odd 20-minute call and say, okay, I don't have anything for you, but speak to XYZ person and go to this resource, that often comes back around to help. And that's not why you do it. There's obviously Adam Grant, the organizational psychologist, talks about givers and takers, and some people givers, they just give and don't expect anything back. Some people take and they just only want to take, and there's matchers who kind of give and expect a bit back in return at some point. I've been told I'm a bit of a matcher, so I'm not going to pretend I'm just a giver. I also get called transactional, but I think that's just because I have to work quickly in recruitment. You have to make quite quick decisions in order to be effective. If I just speak to everybody that wants a job and none of them are right for my roles, I'm never going to make the placements and help the people that I can.
Are there any topics that we didn't talk about that you would wanna cover or use this stage to promote?
I think that we've talked about this to an extent, but when it comes to choosing a career path or deciding what to do with your job area, and I use the word job lightly because a lot of us are creating our own jobs. We're becoming self-employed and starting companies and multi-hyphenates and all the rest of it. When it comes to that, I think that it's easy to get swayed by money and swayed by title and the shoulds and so on. But if you spend enough time on your own understanding who you are, what you're about, what do people praise you for, what do you add the most value in, and so on and so forth, what you come out with is a list of kind of qualities and traits that aren't a job description, but they are core to who you are as an individual. And this is what I do in my coaching with people. It's like stripping away all the labels and all of the things that we think we need to match to a CV, to a job description. And it's going, okay, who am I? What do I deeply care about? So we just spoke about, me meeting people. Like for me, connection is one of my core values. If I can't connect deeply with people through the work I do, I'm going to be frustrated, for example. So that's something I'll seek. I'm a really big extrovert in some ways and a really big introvert in others, so I need a good mix of time alone, time with people. And everybody's got these things. Not everybody can reel them off because they don't spend that much time thinking deeply about it. But my advice is, before you join a company or before you create a business, think about how you are wired, uniquely wired, that makes something good idea for you to do or a bad idea with your time. Because the reality is, as I said, you're the one doing it day to day. how do you experience your day? How do you experience these phone calls or these meetings or the writing that you have to do? And just, gear yourself up for success by knowing who you are.
Takes a certain amount of humility to give some fantasies up, saying, listen, I'm not a good people's manager, or whatever it is, and it takes some soul searching. I have to say that I was so close of making a few career mistakes, and if it wasn't for an unofficial career coach, I would have done. One example, I was an intern at an advertising agency. I was spending about, I'd say, $300-400 per month more than I earned. So I was accumulating debt while working just because I was trying to live close to work, all sorts of stuff. Strategically, very, very bad. And I was very strapped. My whatever savings I had for my military service, they were dwindling down. And at one point, I'm calling someone who's a recruiter, and I'm like, hey, listen, this is where I'm at. I'm an intern for a year now. My next salary bump would be in, I don't know, in the next quarter or something, but I'm suffering. And she goes, hold on. Zoom out. You're working for one of the most respected managers in the country. You're working on some of the most exciting, fastest growing brands. You're suffering, fine, see what you can do to reduce that. But if you choose money over where you are positioned now, strategically, professionally,
it's a short-term gain.
It's a short-term gain, and you are not likely to, you don't know what you're going to gain. You don't know what's going to be like, the customers you're going to be working on, and so on. She goes, powerful, this is when you actually do need to be resilient. And I took that to heart, and I stopped my job search, and I think my manager identified that within me, that I was like, okay, I realize now I've recommitted to the process we were in, and I think that helped her expedite my progression and also kind of helped me rethink my steps. So career coaching, if you don't have someone in your life who's been there and can give you honest, thoughtful advice with you in mind, 100% find someone who can do that professionally, that will help you illuminate some of those blind spots that could turn out to be super, super costly. Just before we wrap up.
And it's the objective perspective that they have about your life that you don't have because you're too in the weeds, right? You just need someone to look kind of a bit more logically at it and go, this makes sense or this doesn't.
Kind of like what you described when you were hitting that rough patch in your last gig. So your relationships were paying a price for that, and you needed someone to say, hey, this is not the Ellen that we know. Otherwise, who knows how long you would have persevered. Before we wrap up, what is the best way to get in touch with you, and where can we learn more about your work?
Yeah, so I've got LinkedIn, I'm fairly active, Twitter, I've got a website. My full name is Ellen Kate Donnelly. I'm pretty active across all social channels, so please get in touch. I'd love to hear if this has resonated, if you want any free career advice or do's and don'ts if you're trying to make a decision. As I say, I always know that these things are better put out there in the world, and people can benefit from my experience. I want to help them.
Excellent. Ellen Donnelly, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for
Pleasure having you here.
It's been amazing. Thank you.
See you next time.